adjacent to a minority area, your appraisal got downgraded. And so, of course, how did it match up? Not surprising, where the African American population was concentrated was redlining, and one of the most extreme cases up there in 8 Mile, Wyoming, because by the 1940s, they were out to 8 Mile, the last of the farmland in the city of Detroit. And you had a developer who said, there's a mixed neighborhood, a racially mixed neighborhood that built out here. It was a pride of a number of the African American communities, and a developer wanted to build right next door. And they went to the federal government, and the FHA said, we won't make the loan because you're adjacent to a mixed neighborhood. There is no racial homogeneity. Development was dead. Developer said, I got an idea. So the developer came back and said, I'll build a wall, okay? And they said, here's what we'll do. Here's the existing African American neighborhood. We'll build this wall, and the wall doesn't have to be so high it has barbed wire, but we won't make loans to black people on this side of the wall. And the FHA said, great. And they approved the project. And they built the wall. This is 8 Mile and Burwood. They built this wall where the black families lived here, built a new subdivision there. You can see the children in the old neighborhood up against the wall. This is what our federal government did. That wall still exists today. You can go see it. It's half a mile long. Now, the children of Detroit have since painted it with images of civil rights. But that wall still exists in the city of Detroit today. These experiences are very much in the conscience of Detroiters, passed down from generation to generation. In many cases, we have folks who still remember them.
Okay, that was Detroit Mayor Mike Duggan with a very illuminative story about our history here in the city of Detroit, up on the Mackinac Island for the Mackinac Policy Conference just a few weeks ago. Joining me now to spend the hour talking about how race and racism and the history of race and racism in this region affect our city and the policymaking decisions that he faces every day is Mike Duggan, the mayor of the city of Detroit. Mike, welcome to Detroit Today.
Thanks for having me back, Stephen.
It's good to see you. So I was in the press room up on Mackinac when you were giving that speech. It was not in the auditorium, but on that audio clip we just played, you can hear the gasping that some people are doing as you're telling this story about this wall. And I think they're gasping about the specific example because a lot of people don't know about it. But I also think there was a sort of surprise at the bluntness and context that you were trying to give that the subject of the challenges we face here in the city of Detroit. I think people were surprised to see you up there talking about race and the history of race in Detroit and how that affects the things that you do.
Well, you could feel the tension in the room in the first 10 minutes of my speech. Right. I mean, people were uncomfortable, and it was a racially mixed audience, predominantly white, but it was racially mixed. There was discomfort. Council President Brenda Jones told me that the gentleman next to her walked out and kept saying, "I'm sorry, I didn't know, I'm sorry." So for some people, it had an effect. But basically, the point of the speech wasn't to be so much backward looking, but to lay out the principles by which we're rebuilding this city today and the principles of inclusion. And every time we have a development and we're making a policy decision that affordable housing is going to be included in these developments, so people are not going to be pushed out. And I get questions, well, why do you have to do that? And I felt like everybody's in one place. And I don't think everybody understands the history. And the fact of the matter is that the policies of the federal government, the policies of the state government, the policies of the city government for nearly a century have contributed to where we are today. My thing wasn't to blame. My thing was to say, here's how we got here. Here are the policies that we got here. And as the city rebuilds, we are going to do this in a way that's fair and inclusive, and here's why. And I mean, you were up there and you know, but I thought the reaction from people across the board was very positive and much more understanding about what are the principles behind why we're doing what we're doing.
Yeah. Talk about how, on a day-to-day basis, you think about those issues: equity, fairness, pushing back against the awful history of racism in this city, obviously in this country. What can I look at in the first 4 years of the Mike Duggan administration that would tell me we're headed in a different direction?
Well, let me start with how I think about it. A city that is 83% African American in a very difficult time voted for me over a very strong African American sheriff candidate.
Sure.
And that just leaves me with an enormous sense of responsibility because the people in this town believed that longtime Detroiters would have a better future if they voted for me. And I did 250 house parties. I sat in people's living rooms all of 2013, which is how I got elected. And I came out with a perspective on this city. The speech I gave at Mackinac was stories I heard in living rooms across the city. And so everything that we do is to say, those who stayed, how do they benefit from the rebirth? Because we want to be welcome for everybody. Everybody should be included. Other countries, other states, the suburbs, Detroiters who left, everybody should be welcome. But we have to rebuild a city in a way that builds around those who stayed. And so really everything we've done, you saw the case of 1214 Griswold, which got turned into the Albert the year before I got elected.
Yeah.
You had people who had been in low-income subsidized housing for, in some cases, 20, 30 years, get kicked out almost overnight because city government didn't protect the housing subsidies. We had 2,200 more units going to expire in the next 3 years. We had 2,200 more people kicked out as investors came in with market rate. We intervened so far on every single property and struck arrangements to get the building owners to renew the housing subsidies so that low-income folks can stay in their properties, most in downtown and midtown, but also in a number of other places in the city. One, as I pointed out, across from me near the Manugian. And so we've done that. You haven't been seeing those stories in the last 3 or 4 years. Everybody who tries to build a new apartment building in the city wants city help. We insist that a minimum of 20% be affordable so that you have people of all incomes living in all neighborhoods. And these are things we've done. And we can talk about building by building, project by project, but it's been the philosophy that we operate under every day.
This is Detroit Today on 101.9 WDET. I'm Stephen Henderson. My guest is Mayor Mike Duggan of the city of Detroit. We are talking, at least in part, about the speech he delivered up on Mackinac Island at the Mackinac Policy Conference last month, where he gave a brief history lesson on the way that race and racism shaped the history of the city of Detroit and affect the decisions that we make today about the future. If you want to join the conversation, have a question for the mayor, give us a call. 313-577-1019 is the number on the phones. That's 313-577-1019. You can also go to the WDET Facebook page, put your comments there, or you can go to Twitter and hashtag Detroit Today, and we'll work your comments into the conversation. Mr. Mayor, I want to ask you about a specific example here of this very question we're talking about, which is who benefits from the things that happen here in the city of Detroit. This week in the news is the question of whether the Pistons, who have agreed to move back to Detroit from Auburn Hills and play in the new Little Caesars Arena, ought to be receiving $34.5 million in subsidy to make that move. There's been a lawsuit filed that says, as Detroiters, we ought to have the right to vote on those things. Of course, the DDA, which is responsible for managing those kinds of incentives, has existed for a long time. We've seen deals like this before in the city. I want to give you a chance to talk about that specific case, but I also want you to put that in the context of this question about who benefits. $34 million for a sports team whose owner is a billionaire, at the same time that we have neighborhoods where people live next door to houses that are falling into the street, where we have neighborhoods that don't have sufficient schools, that don't have sufficient services still. That kind of contrast, I think, sticks out in people's minds. I think it says to people that as much as you've done, as you point out, to try to push back and try to expand the sort of pool of benefit for the things that happens here, there's still something fundamentally wrong with the way we think about these things in the city of Detroit. Can you talk about that?
Well, you have different sources of funds for different projects. We've got $258 million in federal funds at demolition that go in particular areas. We've got HUD funds that redevelop properties and move in low-income people. DDA funds, by law, can only be used for economic development purposes within the downtown district. And so instead of spending it, and basically what we're doing is taking money that would have come in between 2045 and 2048, and we're borrowing against that to make the modifications to bring the Pistons down. I don't know if there's a place in America that has brought a major sports team down for a $34 million contribution. Usually it's hundreds of millions of dollars. But if we hadn't done that, it would have gone to some office building or something else. That's the way DDAs are set up. And Stephen, I want to take issue with something that, I just don't think the media has done a particularly good job of clarifying. There's been suggestions out there that the Pistons deal somehow affects the funding of the school children in Detroit, and that is just so false. The students in Detroit get a state foundation grant. I think last year it was like $7,552. The state of Michigan pays that amount no matter how much is collected in local taxes. So what the state did when they passed the hockey arena bill in 2012 was say the state of Michigan will pay for this. Now, whether that was right or wrong, it is the state of Michigan whose taxes are being collected and used for this. It doesn't affect the school children of Detroit a single dollar. But when you put together a city, you have housing projects that work on housing programs. You have incentives, for example, Flex and Gate that's bringing 700 manufacturing jobs to the east side of Detroit. And you've got incentives for downtown development. And each of these funds is statutorily restricted for a specific purpose.
But shouldn't we be then asking the question about why that's true? Or should we be looking at a different way to prioritize the way that we collect taxes and redistribute them across the city? So, for instance, could we not have a provision of the DDA that set aside money specifically to go to neighborhoods or to schools or to specific projects in neighborhoods off of these projects? Could we think of another way to come up with a direct way for the things that are happening downtown that we're all excited about and that make this a better city as well? Is there a rethink that is in order, given the really, really intense needs and poverty that still exist in our neighborhoods?
And so I have to deal with the laws as they exist and to the extent we could get them changed. The state legislature adopted a bill for the hockey arena in which the state essentially said, we're willing to pay for the hockey arena. Now, I wasn't here in 2012, but I suspect had Mayor Bing gone up and said to the legislature, pass a bunch of money for neighborhoods in Detroit, the chances of the Republican legislature doing that was virtually none. But to say you don't benefit, we're benefiting enormously. We are seeing income tax collections in this city rise at rates we haven't seen. And so last week we had 52 police officers graduate from the police academy. We're putting 300 more officers on the street. We've got another 150 in the academy. Next month, we are starting a huge board-up campaign for the houses we're not going to be able to demolish in the next year or so. We're going to board up the other 11 or 12,000 that are in the pipeline. These things are being funded because the city is coming back economically. We're collecting the income tax revenues. We're balancing our budget. And so this is how you manage a city. You have businesses that generate revenues for you, and if you're running the city well, you're using those revenues wisely to provide public safety, neighborhood redevelopment, job training, and the like, and that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah. Give me a sense, though, of how far you think we are. I mean, you spend a lot of time in neighborhoods. I spend a lot of time in neighborhoods. I've been spending more and more time in the neighborhood where my family lived when I was born, near Livernois and Grand River, a forgotten place in many ways here in the city of Detroit. And so I'm a little more familiar on a daily basis with the things that are just not reaching places like that. When can we expect to see change there?
And so you're asking a really good question. And I have done something, and of course people who have been at the community meetings have seen this over and over, is we've had a very clear plan. Every neighborhood in this city has gotten new streetlights. Every neighborhood in this city has gotten prompt garbage pickup. Every neighborhood has gotten their grass cut in their parks. Every neighborhood is getting much better police and ambulance response time. That applies to everybody. Then we went as far as intense redevelopment, demolition, selling vacant houses. We've moved 3,000 families into vacant houses in the last 3 years. We started in 2014 in the neighborhoods that were 90% or more occupied. Then in 2015, we went to every neighborhood 80% or more occupied. Now, this year, we're into neighborhoods 70% or more occupied because we started where I believe we could get people to fill in those vacant houses in order. You're in a neighborhood that's below that, and so we'll be very shortly rolling out the details that I've shared with the block club leaders in the last month. But we're going to go into neighborhoods like yours with board-up brigades where we are going to board up every single vacant house because we know we're not going to be able to get to the demolitions for 2 or 3 years. We're going to go in and board up every single vacant house. And we are going to enforce the rental codes on landlords in a vigorous way that hasn't been done. And we're going to do that in every neighborhood. So we're starting, we're going to go clean out the drains, the catchments that flood up onto your street when it rains. We're going to clean out every clogged catchment drain in this city over the next 3 years. And so I've been honest with people. This problem has been 60 years in the making, and we are coming back at it. And I'm credibly trying to say, this is what I think we can do next. This is what I think we can do next. And there are people who are saying, you haven't gotten to me yet. And those are hard conversations to have, but I've been honest about it.
Yeah, I mean, and I think for some people it's a matter of priorities, like who comes first. And it seems from the outside, and even from the way that you describe it here, that a fair assessment of that is that some of the people at the top are at the front of the line, whereas most of the people at the bottom are at the back of the line. And I'm not saying that's your fault. I'm saying
I would say to you,
the question is, why don't we push back against it?
So let's talk about the street lighting. We lit this city from outside in, doing downtown and midtown last. We did the neighborhoods first, Main Street second. We went outside in, so it does not reflect that. When I came in, only 12 city parks were being cut. The neighborhood parks were forgotten. We cut all 275 city parks every 7 to 10 days. It isn't some parks get them and some parks don't. And if you're seeing what we're doing now, we are taking bond money that had been sitting in the city for 15 years that hadn't been spent. We're renovating 40 small half-acre neighborhood parks. I'm out every weekend with one of these, and I can't tell you how emotionally powerful this is. Neighbors coming out. I was out at one on the west side a week ago, and the lady said, that swing set there was here when I moved in 40 years ago, except it used to have swings on it. Nobody's touched it since. Now we're putting in new playscapes in 40 small neighborhood parks across the city. So I don't accept the premise of what you're saying. I think we are dealing with what we can deal with in a reasonable way. And, Stephen, I'd remind you, this city got into bankruptcy because you had mayors and councils who were spending money they didn't have, promising things that couldn't be done year after year until the city went broke. And so what you've got, and I show people maps, I show people timelines, and everybody wants to be first. The reality is that we got to have priorities, and we're being honest about them.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to continue our conversation with Detroit Mayor Mike Duggan, and we're going to take your calls. Kenneth in Detroit, Tom in Detroit, Gene in Detroit. We'll get to you next. Stay with us.
Hey, it's Rob Reinhardt, and now you can hear my show on Saturdays from 1 to 3, mixing up rock, soul, funk, folk, and more from Detroit and beyond, plus a ton of new music handpicked just for you. You may even win tickets to something fun. It's happening at 1 o'clock on Saturday. Essential Music from 101.9 WDET. It's Rob Reinhardt from Acoustic Cafe, Sundays at 1 here at WDET. Many thanks for your support of Acoustic Cafe over the years, where we get to discover what's happening in the world of acoustic music all over the world together each week. It all happens through your support. If you haven't yet, join Team DET and support the local programming that you won't hear anywhere else.
WDET, celebrating news and music every day. Become a champion of music discovery and reliable news by joining Team DET. For more info, visit WDET.org.
WDET is supported by DMC with the 29-minute ERS at Detroit Medical Center. DMC Detroit Receiving Hospital is a Level 1 trauma center and has been certified in orthopedic trauma for 40 years. ER wait times are published at dmc.org/ER.
Your city, your town,
your voice.
1019 WDET, Detroit's public radio station.
You're listening to Detroit Today on 1019 WDET. I'm Stephen Henderson, and as always, thanks for tuning in. My guest this hour is Mayor Mike Duggan of the city of Detroit. We are talking about the first 4 years of his administration and the next 4 years. The mayor gave a speech up on Mackinac Island during the Mackinac Policy Conference that tried to put the things that he's doing in some historical context, important historical context, about the way race and racism have shaped the situation we have right now in the city of Detroit. If you want to join the conversation, give us a call. 313-577-1019 is the number on the phones. That's 313-577-1019. You can also go to the WDET Facebook page and put your comments there, or go to Twitter and hashtag Detroit Today. We'll work your comments into the conversation. Gene in Detroit, you're up first.
Yes, good morning, Stephen.
Hey, Gene, how are you?
Good morning, Your Honor.
Good morning.
I would like to ask, why weren't more of the hardest hit funds used to keep homeowners in their homes vis-a-vis the municipal tax foreclosures?
Gene, good question.
So the
the
hardest hit funds were passed by Congress and President Obama to take people who were underwater in their mortgages and do workouts, because the banks had been bailed out. The idea was the homeowners behind in their mortgages. When it became clear around 2012, 2013, that they had far more money than anybody needed in workouts, and it was going to lapse back, a number of states chose to go to a demolition program, and Michigan was one of them. And so Detroit has demolished 5 times more homes than the next closest city. We've dramatically raised the property values, which was the theory. And then in December of 2016, Debbie Stabenow led an effort, as Congress was facing a shutdown, to put $2 billion into demolition funds. And we had a national coalition that included Jamie Dimon for J.P. Morgan Chase and Reverend Jesse Jackson to put that $2 billion in demolition funds. It was passed for the purposes of demolition, and Michigan and Detroit have got the biggest allocations. And all you have to do is go around this city, and you can see the need. So.
But one, and you're right. It was targeted at people who were underwater on their mortgages. It didn't have anything to do with tax foreclosure per se. And we'll get to tax foreclosure a little bit later, because that's a subject I think is pretty pressing in the city as well. But do you think that the city could have done more on the underwater mortgage front to prevent some of the abandonment and blight that we see now? In other words, if we had directed more of that money up in the initial allocation toward that instead of demolition, would we have stopped feeding the problem?
If we could beam back in time, and I could have been mayor of Detroit in 2008 when the housing crisis came, absolutely. I think there could have been a much more rapid intervention, and a number of cities took legal action and got resources. I think the city was way too slow, and we lost something like 20% of the city's population between 2008 and 2013. So would I like to be able to go back in time and say, in 2008 I could have dealt with it at a time? I wish I could. I came in January of 2014 with 40,000 vacant houses sitting there, and we had 60,000 foreclosures staring us in the face over the next 2 years. I went to Lansing with the Michigan Treasurers Association, and got the bill passed that dramatically cut those foreclosures. Because, Stephen, as you know, under the law as it existed, if the county treasurer wanted to do a payment plan to keep you in your home, they by law had to charge you 18% interest. Right. It wasn't helping anybody. We got the law passed, and the legislature would only let us do it on a 2-year demonstration basis to offer 4- and 5-year repayments at 6%. We avoided 60,000 foreclosures, and it was so successful that County Treasurer Eric Sabri just got the legislature to extend it again. So there are a lot of different strategies, and of course the last 3 years we've cut property tax assessments 3 straight years to continue to make it more affordable. So we're working hard to prevent foreclosures. We got teams that door knock everybody who is prospectively being foreclosed to let them know about the assistance and the payment plans. We've reduced the assessments, and we're raising the property values in the neighborhoods by taking down the burned out homes. And I think those strategies together are the right solution.
So despite those efforts, though, we still see this yearly parade, really, of tax foreclosed properties going into this auction, going into the land bank. If they don't go into the auction, we have 10,000 scheduled to go in this year. 4,000 of them are occupied homes. 3 of them are on the block where I was born, over on Tuxedo. Are we doing enough to keep people in?
Let's talk about that. So you're right. There's 10,000. There were 50,000.
There were a lot more.
So the numbers are down dramatically. 4,000 occupied homes. We have teams that are door knocking every single one of those 4,000 occupied homes, and the whole housing coalition and Vicky Cavari from our staff have got teams out trying to prevent that. But here's what we find: every year the land bank gets a couple of thousand houses where they are occupied. The land bank owns them. We go talk to people who say, "What's happening?" I said, "I was a renter. I was paying my rent every month."
And I had no idea.
I had no idea the landlord wasn't paying their taxes until they put the yellow notice on the door. And so Councilman Andre Spivey is about to introduce an ordinance that says if you are going to have a certificate to lawfully rent property in Detroit, you have to be current on your taxes. And so we are going to stop this scam where the landlords are collecting rent checks and not paying their property taxes. So these are complicated issues. But here's what we've done, Stephen. We've gone to the people, the tenants who are there, and we said, we don't want to put you out. And so we've started a program where they go to USnapback, get credit counseling, put $1,000 down, pay $100 a month for their taxes in escrow for 12 months, and they buy the property. And we've had a few hundred people actually who are tenants buy the properties and take ownership because we're doing everything we can to try to keep people from being put out of their homes.
One other possibility there is that the city can always intervene in tax foreclosures. You have right of first refusal on these properties. Is it practical for you to go through and say, hey, these are occupied homes, these 4,000 homes, people are in them, we're going to take them and be sure that people don't get put out?
Yeah, you know, I don't even know how you would begin to do that, to go into the wholesale landlord business. You know, I got enough issues at the land bank. But I got to tell you, I think Treasurer Eric Sabri is just doing a phenomenal job in the outreach effort to try to keep people in his homes. And what I have been doing is working with the treasurer on every single one of these initiatives to keep people in the homes.
Okay. Again, 313-577-1019 is the number on the phones, 313-577-1019. Before we get back to the phones, if you could change something about the way we do the tax foreclosure process, just one thing that you think would make a big difference. I mean, if you think about it, all of the things that you're doing, all of the things, the efforts that you're making in neighborhoods get undermined by the parade of properties into this tax foreclosure status. What's the big picture solution to this so that we stop sort of, feeding the problem every year?
If you'd asked me that 3 years ago, when we were looking at 50 or 60,000 a year, it was a much greater concern. The numbers are down dramatically right now. And so I feel very good about what the treasurer is. Again, this is a state process that the county treasurer administers, but I feel good about what he's doing. I feel good about what the volunteers are doing at the doors. I feel good about the repayment plans. What the solution is more jobs in the city.
Yeah. Again, 313-577-1019 is the number on the phones, 313-577-1019. You can also go to the WDET Facebook page, put your comments there, or go to Twitter and hashtag Detroit Today. We'll work your comments into the conversation. Let's go to Cindy. Cindy from the 8 Mile Boulevard Association. Welcome to Detroit Today.
Hi, Stephen. Hi, Mayor Duggan.
Yeah, go ahead.
Morning.
I wanted to make a couple points. I wanted to thank Mayor Duggan and the city. One of the ways that people don't know that the mayor supports the neighborhoods is through supporting organizations like ours who are doing work in the neighborhoods by renovating parks and community gardens. And the other thing is through facade improvement programs. And one of the big projects we are completing with the help of city funds is the block on 8 Mile at Burwood. And we've been trying to draw attention to the Burwood Wall for quite a while. And because we've improved those storefronts on that block, the owner of the store that's right at the corner of Burwood and 8 Mile has expressed an interest now in improving his property. And we think that that would be a great place to put a mural to bring attention to that Burwood Wall. And so we can point out the history and never forget the history, because it's an important part of our culture.
Yeah, Cindy, thanks very much for the call and those comments. As the mayor pointed out in his speech, kids have been sort of muraling that wall for some time. It's a pretty colorful object there
drawings
now.
of Rosa Parks and the bus.
Right.
And,
it's a lot more appealing from a visual standpoint now than it used to be. It's still, though, this symbol of this awful past.
But what Cindy's pointing out is happening in so many areas of the city, and that is, if you wait for city government to solve all the problems, you can wait a long time. But what's happening is they're doing it on 8 Mile, they're doing it on Livernois, they're doing it on Verner, they're doing it on McNichols. You've got neighborhood and business associations coming together saying, we're going to improve the storefront. Now we're up to almost 180 businesses with green lights. They've created zones of safety. But it has been the partnership with neighborhood groups and business groups across the city coming forward. And the neighborhood groups come to us that we're going to organize a huge cleanup. We'll come and deliver a dumpster for the weekend and take it away. And so, for all of those groups out there that are on the ground driving Detroit's rebirth, they're the ones that are making the difference.
Yeah. Again, Cindy, thanks for the call. Let's go to Kenneth in Detroit. Welcome to Detroit Today.
Good morning,
Kenneth.
Mr. Mayor.
Good morning.
I presumed you would win when you were running before. You stopped me, and you won. There's things, the car insurances. I know that's put off till the fall. Please continue to work on that. Help us to improve our homes by lowering those insurance rates, those car insurance rates. That you've done a fine job. I appreciate you speaking out up in Mackinac. That all we can ask is that you continue to work in the cities and put the ordinance departments to work. You promised that you'd have those houses that they're renting out. Continue working those. That's what we need. I love my home. I love my city. Please take care of those things. You will be the next mayor again if you start working those neighborhoods. I promise you that.
Yeah, Kenneth,
Well, thank you.
Thanks very much for the call. Where are we with auto insurance?
I was at dinner last night with one of the top Republican legislators going over the details of where we are going. And I'm really feeling confident this fall we're going to get a solution. And I think now people more and more understand that car insurance is where it is because the medical profession and the lawyers are ripping off the auto owners in this state. And it costs $900 to insure a car in Ohio. It costs $1,700 on average to insure a car in the suburbs and $3,400 on average to insure a car in Detroit. And it's because of this 1973 no-fault statute that Lansing has got to fix that allowed doctors and hospitals to charge whatever they wanted. Tom Leonard, the Speaker of the House, has said to me, Last time you tried to do it and give Detroiters the option to bring their rates down. He says, let's try it a different way. Let's bring the rates down for everybody in Michigan. And right now, rates are rising faster in Macomb County than they are in Detroit because these same scams they're running on these ridiculous bills and the lawyers encouraging these high bills are now starting to spread to the surrounding suburbs, and we're going to find a bigger coalition.
And you still think that the solution is this sort of smaller insurance package where there is a limitation on the medical expenses you can charge.
So here's what happens. If you're on Medicare and you go in for an MRI today, remember, I come from the healthcare industry, I understand this stuff. You go in for an MRI today, Medicare will pay the doctor and clinic $500. If you're on Blue Cross will pay that same doctor and that same clinic $600. If you go in on car insurance, that doctor and clinic get paid $3,100. Same office, same MRI, and the lawyers are encouraging the running up of these medical bills because they're suing and taking a third of them, which is why you see all these billboards about Ben in a car accident, call me. Here's the people who ought to be the angriest. In the other 49 states in America, if you're on Medicare, you're covered if you're in a car accident. I mean, Medicare covers you in the hospital and your care. But in Michigan, it's the only state where you have to buy your health insurance, even if you're 68 years old and on Medicare. The law says you have to pay for health care a second time on your car insurance. Nearly half the premiums the senior citizens in Michigan are paying are for the health care they already have. And I think the legislature, which stopped us the last time because of the lobbying of the lawyers and the doctors, I think the legislature is now getting very concerned how they're going to explain to seniors, why do you have to double pay for your health care when you've already got Medicare coverage? So we're seeing real momentum. It's an indefensible position that the medical community and the lawyers have taken, and I think there's a lot of
and you're certain that rates will go down and people will not want for coverage in catastrophic accidents if this passes.
And so you will get the option that you want. If you've already got health care coverage and you fall off a ladder, you have catastrophic care. Why are you paying for it a second time when you write your car insurance check? It's only the state of Michigan is the only one of the 50 states that has all of your health care coverage in a car accident paid out of your car insurance. Everybody else relies on health care coverage you already have. But yes, I do expect to get guaranteed rate cuts into the bill. Otherwise, there's no point to be doing this.
Yeah. Okay, let's go to Maurice in Detroit. Welcome to Detroit Today, Maurice.
Hi, thanks for taking my call, Stephen.
Sure.
And thanks, Mr. Mayor, for being on the show.
Good morning.
I had a question about something that you said earlier in the show where you were, like many mayors around cities in the country, touting 80% and 20% as the levels of affordable housing that are good to keep long-term residents in their homes. I'm just curious, you're a smart guy. Over time, is that a sustainable way to keep people in their neighborhoods since you're trading 80% for 20%? And before you answer, just one quick comment about tax foreclosures that knowing several people who are going through the tax foreclosure process, it's not particularly helpful to hear that because the numbers are from 50,000 to 10,000 that it's not as big of a priority. I'll jump off and take your answer offline. Thanks.
Maurice, thanks very much for the call and the comments. Go
ahead,
Mr.
So the question was how much it's holding back our progress, and I feel the same way on the homicide rate. You can bring it down 10%. It's not an acceptable number, but it's still evidence of progress. But you misunderstood what I said on the affordable. The existing affordable housing, we are preserving 100%. Every affordable unit that's in these apartment buildings for the last 4 years, we have made sure that 100% of them that were up for renewal have gotten a renewal on federal subsidy. Then when new housing of any type is being built, somebody wants to build an office building on Alexandrine, 2 blocks from DMC, the Strathmore, 120 units. 40% of the new housing in that case was set aside as affordable. So we're keeping the affordable we have, and every time there's a new apartment building with city support, we're adding on more and more affordable at 20%. And what that is doing for us is we've had, I think, 20 projects in downtown and midtown in the last 4 years, housing projects that have been built that had 20% or more affordable. So we're spreading the affordable unit. What I like to say is doctors and nurses can afford these high-end apartments, but now the folks who push the wheelchairs and who make the food in the kitchens are able to live in that neighborhood as well. That's the kind of city we're trying to build.
Yeah. What about his comment about tax foreclosure? Yeah, 10,000 is still a lot of people.
Yeah, you start with a universe, and I don't know what the number is, 10,000, but there is a redemption period. That number is going to come down significantly. And so there is a whole team of volunteers who are out right now knocking on doors. And every year we see this. 60, 70% of the people who start off in foreclosure end up getting in payment plans and coming out of it. And I don't know how to say this any more than I can. Our people are knocking on every single person's door who's subject to foreclosure, saying, here are the means to help you. And what you can do besides saying, here are the means, put people in payment plans and the like, I'm not sure what else you're supposed to do, but I've been very pleased that Ted Phillips and the whole team has been organizing that.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to take another quick break, and when we come back, we'll continue our conversation with Detroit Mayor Mike Duggan and take more of your calls. Stay with us on Detroit Today.
WDET is supported by DMC with the 29-minute ERS at Detroit Medical Center. DMC Detroit Receiving Hospital is a Level 1 trauma center and has been certified in orthopedic trauma for 40 years. ER wait times are published at dmc.org/ER.
Hi, I'm Amanda LeClaire. Join me at noon for Culture Shift, 2 hours of great music to get you through the middle of the day. Plus find out about all the great things happening in Detroit this week. That's Culture Shift, noon to 2 on 1019 WDET and online at WDET.org.
WDET is supported by Live Nation, presenting An Evening with Alison Krauss and David Gray. One night only, Wednesday, October 4th at the Fox Theater. Tickets go on sale this Friday at 10 a.m. at livenation.com or the Fox Theater box office.
You're listening to Detroit Today on 1019 WDET. I'm Stephen Henderson, and as always, thanks for tuning in. My guest this hour is Mayor Mike Duggan of the city of Detroit. We're talking about his first 4 years in office and his bid for another 4 years up on Mackinac Island last month at the Mackinac Policy Conference. The mayor tried to put the challenges that we face in Detroit into the context of our racial history, the history of race and racism in Detroit, how it informs the things we see today, and how it ought to shape the way we approach our problems in the future. You want to join the conversation, give us a call, 313-577-1019. That's 313-577-1019. You can also go to the WDET Facebook page and put your comments there, or go to Twitter and hashtag Detroit Today. Will work your comments into the conversation. Let's go to Judy in Detroit. Judy, welcome to Detroit Today.
Hi, thank you, Stephen. Hello, Mr. Mayor. I really appreciate your willingness to come on this show and explain things. My only hesitance, I have followed your career, in your mayoral career, since you first were considering running. I remember a story you told out at a coffee shop one time in which you described going into a local pastor's office and telling him that you were thinking about running for mayor, and he looked at you and said, you do know you're white, don't you, Mike? And I thought that was a wonderful story, and I think you have demonstrated, like at the Mackinac Policy Council and other places, your commitment to a post-racial, I don't know how to say that, a diverse and sustainable community. My only hesitancy about you has been I have thought many times that you identified too much with the big guys, the Illiches and the Gilberts and those folks, and not enough with the city. But I'm beginning to realize that all of this is much more complicated than I understand. I've been following Detroit politics for about 60 years now, and there's a lot of it I just don't get because I don't have the information that you have. But I am very impressed by the scope and complexity of your vision of this city and of what it is and what it can be.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to tell you, my husband and I were out on doing our radio patrol last week, and we live in I don't know if you know us as a Waco neighborhood.
Oh, sure, absolutely.
And
Go ahead, Judy. We gotta get to the point here. Can you quickly?
okay,
We're running out of
sorry,
time. That's
I tend
okay.
to be a motor mouth.
That's all right.
And the point is that every time we're on patrol, we are looking at how does the neighborhood look today. And last week we were just amazed as we drove every street in this neighborhood and realized how much better it looks here just because of all the houses that have been torn down.
Yeah, Judy, I appreciate the call and those comments. They're a part of the city that most people probably are not familiar with, but that you've gotten to.
Over on the west side, it is an area that has. But our latest polling shows 72% of Detroiters feel the city is heading the right direction, whereas 45% of the people in the state think the state's heading the right direction, and 35% of the country. And
so
who
you're doing better than Rick Snyder and Donald Trump.
Who would have thought? Who would have thought you'd see the day?
Yeah.
But I understand the reality is that if you sat with me in a house party 3 years ago, it was police aren't showing up, lights are out, get the house down. You're sitting with me now. It's the dead tree in front of my house. It's the catchment area that's clogged up and flooding the drain. It's my neighbor who leaves the garbage can out for 3 days. It is a very different conversation, and that's good because expectations are rising and people are getting more demanding. And that's the way it's supposed to work.
Yeah, we have some questions on our Facebook page that I want to get to quickly. I think they're pretty quick answers. One from Onita Jackson says, please ask the mayor how he feels about sports fans who come to the city and disrespect it, and how he addresses that topic.
I think what happened on opening day was wrong, and I've talked to the chief about it, and I agree. We're going to deal with that more aggressively.
Yeah. Robert Elms, director of Galapagos Art Space, says, we endorse you for mayor 2 days before you announce your re-election campaign. When will the city create a Department of Cultural Affairs to help coordinate the growth of arts in Detroit?
Yeah, we're talking about that right now. In fact, I was down on Grand Boulevard with a group of artistic folks and a lot of the electronic music folks last night who are asking exactly the same question. And we got to figure this out because not all artists want to be organized. So
it's sort of the antithesis of.
But no, you're raising a good point, and we're talking about do we bring this council back, and is it a bunch of wealthy people affiliated with the DIA, or can we get the emerging kind of artist music community to come together, and we're gonna get that. We're gonna get something going with basically the rebels driving it.
Yeah, let's go to Jeff in Detroit. Jeff, welcome to Detroit Today.
Hey, how you doing?
Good.
First of all, I want to say thanks to the mayor for being so inclusive and great and enacting a lot of programs that have helped this city, in my view. I've been a resident for 8 years and grew up in the region, and I live at the Gratiot and Shane area. We had a shooting over there recently where an off-duty police officer was killed at night at a liquor store, Motor City Liquor.
Mm-hmm.
And this has been a real sore spot in the neighborhood. And, I was really encouraged when Chief Craig was on Facebook Live within, 20, 30 minutes of the shooting at the location, reassuring us what was going on. We heard the shots from my house. But I'm wondering, what is the mayor doing to incentivize business owners like Motor City Liquor who are kind of negligent and, not really taking care of their properties, not keeping this place safe? They don't have proper surveillance. Can we get them on the green light program? And what are we doing to incentivize that? Can we, pass an ordinance to force certain businesses to get on this program? Because it seems
Jeff,
to have improved safety at other locations.
Jeff, I'm not cutting you off. We just have only about a minute and a half left, but I think that's a great question. Can we expand Project Greenlight?
It's expanding rapidly. We're now up to 180 businesses. We've got 80 more in the pipeline. The council is ready to pass an ordinance saying if your business is open after 10 p.m., you need to be on Greenlight. But we have so many businesses voluntarily in the pipeline, we don't need to do it. In many cases, neighbors have gone in and demanded of their local business. But the thing that's most interesting to me, in the last 6 months, we've had one carjacking at a Greenlight store, and we had the person arrested within 24 hours. Chief Craig has made a commitment to this. It is creating zones of safety, and we're just going to keep on expanding it. And I'd encourage the neighbors to talk to their store owners about signing up.
Okay. We've got about 30 seconds left. I want to give you a chance to just sort of wrap up. Say why people ought to vote for you for 4 more years.
Well, I'm working long hours, and my thing would be this. If somebody has a plan to do it faster and better, lay it out. Because I won't tell you I've solved everything. But I'm waiting for somebody to say
I can do better.
Specifically what they would have done. But if people want me to rehire me for another 4 years, I'll do the best I can.
All right. Mike Duggan, Mayor of the City of Detroit, thank you very much for joining us on Detroit Today.
Thanks for having me.
We'll have you back soon. That's it for me today. I'll be back tomorrow. I hope you will too. This is 101.9 WDET, Detroit's public radio station, a community service of Wayne State University. We will see you tomorrow.